Hey, my friends, thanks for joining your girl, Anna B, again for another episode of Behind Them Walls. This time, we're going behind the walls in the state of Louisiana. Their Department of Corrections website is not as giving of information as other states we've done, but I've got 5 ladies on the lineup for y'all. Hope you enjoy the video. If you're not already doing so, join us by hitting that subscribe button. Make sure you like and share, and hope to see you on the live chat. This is Ernest Smith. He was taken in by a church group at the age of 10 that became his family. He was driving a truck during the week and working as a minister on the weekends. He was a divorced father of 1 when he and Emma married on November 17, 1990. The couple resided in New Orleans East. After moving to Texas in August 2005, when Hurricane Katrina hit, Ernest accepted a position in Atlanta to lead a mega church. They stopped in New Orleans briefly before heading to Atlanta to settle into their new home. Within a week, Ernest would be dead. Emma told police that Ernest had spent the night out with his friend. When he returned home, she heard a loud pop. She then grabbed Ernest and called 911. April 12, 2006, police officers responded to Emma's call, finding the door to their apartment wide open and 38-year-old Pastor Ernest Smith, covered in blood, lying on the stairs, shot and clearly already deceased. There were no suspects, no witnesses, or security cameras in the area. And remember, this is in the wake of Hurricane Katrina, so it's a bit of an isolated area at the time. The case went cold, and Emma moved back to her hometown in Mississippi. 7 years later, 2 witnesses who were relatives of James Rain, a man who was having an affair with Emma before Ernest was killed. Ernest was aware of the affair, and he told James to stay away from his wife. Well, that didn't quite happen. 2 years after Ernest's murder, Emma and James married and moved to Poplarville, Mississippi in 2008. October 21st, 2011, James's mother found him dead in his bed he shared with Emma from 2 gunshot wounds to the head. Emma was out of town at the time and had asked James's mother to check on him because she couldn't get a hold of him. And unfortunately, just like Ernest's murder, there wasn't much evidence, just a dead man. The 2 witnesses that came forward believed the murders were connected and contacted a New Orleans detective. The men said that Alfred Terry Everett had admitted to killing Ernest. Terry Everett confessed that he was hired by James Rain and Emma to kill Ernest for $10,000. It also came out that in February 2006, 2 months before Ernest's murder, James Rain was made the sole beneficiary on Ernest's $800,000 life insurance policy. James and Emma were in Mississippi, living in a home built off Ernest's life, literally. Ernest's murder file was reopened and reviewed closer. There were a couple details that stood out to the detectives. Terry Everett had given details only the killer would have known. Also, Emma said she grabbed Ernest and called the police, but photos show that she had no blood on her at all. And on her cell phone records, it showed she had called James after making that 911 call. It was also discovered Emma's first husband, Leroy Evans, mysteriously suffocated. Leroy's $25,000 life insurance policy was doubled because it was deemed to be an accidental death. There was a pattern here, obviously, and the motive was money. In July 2013, Terry Everett was arrested in Texas. A month later, Emma was arrested in Missouri, where she lived with none other than her 4th husband. She was brought back to New Orleans. Terry Everett refused to turn on Emma, and his confession made to James's relatives was used to convict him on December 6, 2015. He was sentenced to life without parole. In August 2016, Emma's trial began for the murder of Ernest Smith. Prosecutors presented evidence related to how James died as well. They didn't mention Leroy's death due to lack of evidence. Emma's defense was that James put her up to it, blaming the dead man who couldn't speak for himself. Juries did not buy her theory. And on August 12, 2016, Emma was found guilty of second-degree murder. She was given a mandatory life sentence in prison. On August 20th, 2007, Amy fatally stabbed her two children, 7-year-old Braxton and 9-year-old Camille. The family's dog, Princess, was also stabbed to death. A coworker noticed Amy, a teacher's aide at the time, didn't show up for work. That coworker went to Amy's house and after getting no response, contacted Chad. Chad was Amy's ex-husband. Chad called 911 asking for a welfare check on the children. It was Chad's father who also showed up at Amy's house, and he was the one to discover the sad, gruesome scene. Authorities eventually arrived and reportedly had to use a taser to subdue Amy. She also had stab wounds, self-inflicted of course. She was taken to the hospital, and after her ICU stay, she was held at the Louisiana Correctional Institution for Women because the parish's detention center could not accommodate a female pretrial inmate who needed medical care. Amy was married to Chad, but he initiated a divorce in 2005, which was finalized April the following year. Chad remarried in 2008. Chad and Amy held joint custody of the children. Amy told a psychiatrist that Camille had begged for her life. Both children had defensive wounds to their hands and arms. Beautiful Camille, had been stabbed about 30 to 35 times to her torso. Braxton with approximately 50 to 55 stab wounds to the front and back of his torso. All of Camille's vital organs were hit by the knife. Amy stabbed both of her precious children in their hearts. She stabbed herself about 30 times in the abdomen, chest, neck, and wrists. Amy and the children were all found in the bed together. They had been dead at least an hour. Amy attacked Braxton on the couch, and Camille was brutally stabbed in Amy's bedroom and bathroom. The prosecuting attorney stated that Amy resented her ex-husband, but her defense argued she was under a form of insanity. Both sides had expert witnesses who supported their version of events. The prosecution also presented 2 suicide notes written by Amy to her husband and her mother-in-law. The note stated that he had committed infidelity and he would not get the children. The mother-in-law encouraged Braxton and Camille to have a relationship with their stepmother, but Amy disapproved. Amy was convicted of both murders. She was sentenced to 2 life terms to be served consecutively. Jurors voted 9-3 on the death penalty, but because the state of Louisiana requires a unanimous decision to sentence someone to death, she was given the default mandatory life in prison sentence. In 2011 and 2015, Amy's appeals were denied by the Louisiana Supreme Court. She appealed to the higher courts, and in May 2018, the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court Appeals denied her arguments that the mental health experts proved that Amy was insane. The following year, the U.S. Supreme Court denied a hearing of her appeal. In 2011, 22-year-old Victoria Perez was 8 months pregnant when she disappeared. She was last seen at a doctor's appointment. After 4 years, her remains were finally found. They were buried in Pamela's front yard. Pamela was charged with the murder of Victoria and her unborn child. The break in this cold case came after Pamela's children turned her into police. Investigators said around 2010, Pamela's husband left her and moved to Texas. In an attempt to win him back, she faked the pregnancy and sent him fake sonograph photos. Around the time she would have been at term, she came up with a plot to get a baby of her own. She went to the Rapids Women and Children's Hospital with her youngest daughter, looking to find a baby. She found Victoria. Again, Victoria was 8 months pregnant at the time. She lured Victoria by lying to her, telling her that she had some baby clothing. She was able to get Victoria to her Oakdale home. This is when Pamela attacked Victoria, killing her with blunt force, attempting to take the baby, but failed, burning Victoria's body over several days before burying her in her front yard. In your own front yard? Pamela's children, ages 10, 8, and 6 years old, were at the home when Victoria was killed. Pamela eventually pleaded guilty after sitting in jail for some time to second-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison. An 18-month-old died in Tatiana's care on June 5, 2020. She was caring for the child at her home. There was no family connection between Tatiana and the toddler. Tatiana was also under investigation in 2013 for torturing another child while in her care. Tatiana was originally set to have her case tried before a jury, but as jurors were about to be chosen, she asked for a bench trial. Monday, July 8, 2024. 11 witnesses were called by the district attorney's office to prove Tatiana had shaken the toddler to death. 4 medical doctors agreed that the bleeding and swelling to the child's brain was a result from acute abusive head trauma. Additionally, evidence and witnesses were presented to show Tatiana was the only person who had access to the child at the time she was injured. On July 11, 2024, District Judge Donald E. Hathaway Jr. found Tatiana guilty of second-degree murder. She was sentenced to life in prison without possibility of probation, parole, or suspension of her sentence. Brandy Holmes was originally sentenced to death February 16, 2006 for her part in the 2003 New Year's Day murder of Blanchard minister Reverend Julian Brandon and the attempted murder of his wife, Alice. Alice was shot in the head. She survived, but she was left gravely disabled. She died in 2008. Brandy and her boyfriend, Robert Coleman, forced their way into the Brandons' home, shot the elderly man, and when he didn't die, they stabbed him multiple times. Again, Alice was also shot in the head, but survived. Brandy was arrested after her neighbors called a tip line telling police she'd been bragging about killing an elderly couple and trying to sell their jewelry. Brandy's boyfriend, Robert Glenn Coleman, was first tried, convicted, and sentenced to death in 2005. Robert appealed to the Louisiana Supreme Court, citing an error in jury selections. His conviction was reversed in 2007. He was retried later in 2012. He was again found guilty and sentenced to death. In February 2016, the Louisiana Supreme Court affirmed his second conviction, but his death sentence was reversed. In May, he was resentenced to life without probation, parole, or suspension of his sentence. Conflicting expert witness testimony led to his resentencing. That same year, Brandy's death sentence was vacated. She was resentenced to life without parole.